This year has been rough for movies, that's no secret. And most of them have been, in all honesty, mediocre to the 10th degree. In fact, I thought this list was gonna be hard to make because I didn't think I would even be able to put together 10 movies. But it was actually hard because there were way more movies I truly enjoyed than I remember there being. In fact, it was really hard to place 9 and 10, and it took me a while, but I did it. And now, without any further wait, here are the definitive, obviously correct, not just an opinion, but actual fact, top 10 best movies of 2023. Number 10, Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, I skipped this one in theaters and genuinely regret doing that because this was a damn fine film. The marketing just made it feel extremely generic, and I think that's why it didn't do too well at the box office. But this movie had an extremely compelling story without compromising what makes Dungeons and Dragons so popular, which is the fact that you go on these big quests with your friends. The world felt so lived in and real, it subverts the fantasy genre in really clever and funny ways. The action scenes had no right being as incredible and exciting as they were, and Chris Pine, holy shit, this is one of my favorite performances from him, honestly. He is so charismatic and hilarious. His comedic timing and delivery of lines was so engaging. And Hugh Grant as one of the main villains was one of the funniest performances I've seen this year. Overall, everything about this movie was really creative and memorable, and I believe it's going to become a cult classic someday. Number 9. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. I feel like there isn't much to say. This movie has incredible action sequences, and Tom Cruise does a crazy death-defying stunt. The stuff I will talk about is the AI narrative of the film. I really liked how they dealt with how scary AI is becoming in our world, and I found all those aspects of the film extremely smart and thrilling. The one thing I wasn't too big on was how the main human villain connected to Ethan's character. I found that really cheesy, but the villain himself was pretty intimidating and was a great addition to the franchise. 8. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Seeing Gunn's overall vision come to life was awesome. I think the actual narrative pacing of the movie was oddly structured, and I think keeping Rocket in a coma for the whole movie was a little weird. But despite those little issues with the movie, it still gave me exactly what I wanted from not only a Guardians film, but an MCU film. It went darker, had actually clever and hilarious jokes that didn't feel like the shitty characters talking over each other and going back and forth forced comedy that the MCU has been doing. And it gave us an emotional story that brought a satisfying end to Gunn's trilogy and these characters. The visuals were incredible, and the action and overall film was handled with an actual vision and not just driven by committee. It reminded me of what the MCU can be when Marvel allows their talent to flourish. Number 7. Creed 3. I think this is my favorite of the 3 Creed films, and an outstanding directorial debut for Michael B. Jordan. The story is complex and layered with so much conflicting emotion that puts every character in such an interesting situation. It makes the audience captive with anxiety as we all wait to see what will happen next. And legal issues aside, Majors was insane in this film and is hands down one of the greatest Rocky universe villains. My only issue with the movie is I wish Rocky was in it, because there are some moments where he realistically should have been there. But, you know, obviously Sylvester Stallone was having issues with the producers, thus Rocky couldn't make an appearance. But what a visually stunning and compelling movie. Number 6. John Wick Chapter 4. This was the best action movie of the year, which, let's be honest, we all knew it would be before the film even came out. The camera is always used in such creative ways, which, speaking about that, this movie has a one-take scene that is genuinely one of the best one-takes I've ever seen. It was so perfect and heart-pounding to see in the theater. This movie somehow, on the 4th installment, outdid itself and has the best action in the whole series. The lore of this world kept building, Keanu brought everything he could to the role, and if this is the last one, it had a satisfying conclusion. Number 5. The Creator. I feel like this movie is way better than the critical reception it got. Gareth Edwards' original sci-fi drama is breathtaking, and to me, as an inspiring filmmaker, this film is extremely important. If you don't know, the majority of this film was shot on a Sony FX3, which is my dream camera. It's around $3,000 and you can pick it up at Best Buy or Amazon. They filmed around 90% of the movie on this little guy, and Edwards for the most part was helming the camera and was editing the movie on his laptop himself and helping out with the VFX. This was an actual honor to watch. It felt like such a lived-in world, and the story was just so interesting. They could have easily made the AIs the evil bad guys, but they didn't. The main character, played by John David Washington, was not really a good person and had extreme flaws because he was so broken by the loss and trauma he carries. And the best thing about this movie, besides the visuals, is its emotion. I cried a few times and was choked up while watching a majority of it. The editing in this film just brought a big weight of emotion, which it doesn't really make any sense if you haven't watched it, but I think if you have seen it, you'll get an idea of where I'm coming from. The acting was so damn good from the entire cast, and Madeline Univoiles, who plays Alfie, this was her first acting credit and she did phenomenal. This movie was so heavily criticized for being like Terminator, Blade Runner, and so many other things, but I didn't find it too distracting, and in all honesty, it's kind of how this movie could get made. This movie's not an IP, and Edwards had to pitch it as similar to other successful projects to get it greenlit, and I'm okay with it. At the end of the day, this movie did what all good art is supposed to do. It inspired. I know this movie will be something people like me will constantly go back to for filmmaking inspiration, and I think it's one of the most important films of the decade. Yeah, I said it. The way this film uses its budget should be studied by the rest of Hollywood. It cost $80 million to make and looked better than any of the $200+ million films that came out this year. If you haven't checked this one out, go ahead and do yourself a favor and give it a watch. Number 4, Talk to Me. The horror film that was made by 2 YouTubers was actually good. Now, if you don't know, this film was made by Michael and Danny Filippo of the YouTube channel Raka Raka. Let me tell you, I've always been in love with Raka Raka. Now, I started watching them all the way back in 6th grade when I most definitely shouldn't have been doing that. And I'm glad I did. They changed what could be done on YouTube. They broke all the rules, and I love them for that. They found a way to put a budget together of $4.5 million to make their small horror film, Talk to Me. And man, this was my favorite original film of the year, and another film that I believe will be extremely influential for upcoming filmmakers. This film was not only scary, disturbing, and overall creepy, it was shockingly emotional. It was another film that brought me to tears this year. Their humor was implemented so well throughout the entire movie without undermining the drama. The camera work was breathtaking and gave so much energy and life to the project, and the prosthetics in this movie are beautiful. I loved this movie, and to see those two get this film made and the fact that it was successful beyond belief makes me so happy for them because they deserve it. Okay, so the next 3 movies are genuinely perfect in my opinion, and I wouldn't change a single thing about them. So with that said, number 3, Godzilla Minus One. This movie blew me away. I'm a casual Godzilla fan, so I haven't seen everything related to the character, but I've seen a decent amount of Godzilla content, and this was hands down, without a doubt, the best Godzilla property I've seen. This movie, along with my other top 3 films, is everything you go to the movies for. This story is so damn emotional, and the ending had me crying like a baby. And I had a lump in my throat for the whole movie. The themes about countries making terrible decisions and then forcing their citizens to pay the price, fighting for a better future, of course, since this is a Godzilla film, the dangers of nuclear war and war as a whole, finding family, and the importance of human life. All this gave the movie such a deep emotional experience. All of the human characters are so interesting to follow, and the main character, Kyoichi, was such a beautifully written character with such an engaging and heartbreaking arc. The acting was so enthralling, and everyone brought their A game, and then some. The visuals look so good, which this movie, like the creator, should be something Hollywood looks at, because this film only cost $15 million. Yeah, you heard me right. $15 million. And besides one shot This movie looks immaculate. To put things into perspective, the last American Godzilla movie, Godzilla vs. Kong, had a possible $200 million budget. So yeah, this is crazy what they got away with on that budget, because this movie is so exciting. The Godzilla sequences are really intense, and the sound mixing is astonishingly immersive. One last thing I want to praise this movie for is the color grade. This is the best looking color grade for a movie I've seen all year, and I loved it so much. Number 2, Oppenheimer. Nolan once again proves why he is my favorite filmmaker of all time. This was a fucking film. It was pure cinema. There was a lot to love about this movie, man. The acting performances, the direction, the sets, the practical effects, the score, the sound mixing, the pacing. Holy crap, the pacing. This movie doesn't feel like 3 hours. It starts and it just keeps going and going and keeps the story engaging with humor and expressive characters and the famous Nolan time jumping. I think what really made this movie work was seeing inside the mind of Oppenheimer and allowing his flaws to be prevalent, because he was a complicated man in real life. He isn't necessarily the hero, but you still feel for him. You feel for him so much that you get angry at the decisions he makes and how naive he can be. Downey gives his best acting performance hands down and proves he's more than Tony Stark. And Nolan proves once more that he isn't just a big action director. This was my favorite theater experience of the year, and I'm so glad a movie like this was made by one of the greatest filmmakers to ever live. Number 1, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. What makes this film work so well, for starters, is Paul Rudd. I think he gave one of the best performances in the MCU to date. I loved the father and daughter relationship and how it gave the movie a more complex and rounded story. Is he gonna let the multiverse die, or is he gonna get those 5 years he missed with his daughter? I think when you look at this movie a little closer, it has truly deep and human themes about learning how parents' roles in their children's lives shape them and how important it is to be there. And obviously I'm bullshitting you because that movie sucked ass. Man, let me tell you, I walked out of Quantumania with a splitting headache, and so did all my friends I went to go watch it with. Anyways, number 1 is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. This is the most beautifully animated film I've ever seen. Its story is 2.5 hours long, allowing you to actually be with the characters for the first hour and a half before we jump into all the multiverse craziness. And all of those human everyday character moments are anything but boring. They perfectly set everything up without rushing it to all the quote-unquote fun stuff. They knew in order to make that ending feel scary, you had to care about Miles' family and understand them more. And even though this movie has a lot of humor, it knows when to get serious, and when it does, you feel the weight of it. Spider-Man is my favorite fictional character of all time. I love this character so much, and what the character represents, which is more than just responsibility. Spidey represents sacrifice, financial hardship, guilt, loss, perseverance. But most of all, Spidey represents not being the perfect person, but being the best person you can be. And this film really goes for that last theme and showed almost everything I love about the character in one movie. So without a doubt, it is the best movie of 2023. And like I said earlier, my list is fact, but I would love to hear yours. So here's to a hopeful 2024 film slate, and thank you for watching.